From the Lincoln Journal-Star, this is the Life in the Red podcast with Luke Mullin and Amie Just.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Lincoln Journal-Star's Life in the Red podcast. As always, Luke and Amie back with you. Another week, another update. Nebraska football coming off a bye week in this one, and finally, as I had to scrape the ice off my car, the frost this morning, I was like, all right, it's fall weather, it's football season. I mean, it has been football season, but we've been waiting for it. Lots to talk about a big upcoming matchup against Indiana. Briefly for you as we jump into this one today, your quick update around Husker sports. The Nebraska soccer team, a couple of recent losses, continuing a tough stretch of Big Ten play for them. Lost 3-2 Rutgers. That was a match they led at halftime. Sarah Weber scored twice in that one, but they fell 3-2. And then 2-0 loss to Maryland. Now 1 win, 6 losses, 1 draw in Big Ten play. But still an opportunity. Couple matches to change those fortunes. Final home stretch at Hibner. Oregon's there on Thursday. Washington on Sunday. Good news for the softball team, though. We were there for their first fall scrimmage. They're holding 4 of those here in October. And kind of a surprise, Jordy Ball, 8 months after tearing her ACL, she's back out there. She's ready to go.
Yeah, super surprising. She'd been trending in that direction for a couple of weeks, it sounded like, but you never know until you get out there, right? But yeah, very, very surprising for the fans who showed up, not expecting to see her, not expecting to see Caitlin Olinsky, and not expecting to see Emerson Cope, and all of them got in the circle. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, every injury is different, but usually, the timeline for that is 8 months is very optimistic. 9 months is, maybe it can be 10. It's that's really incredible that she's out there. She's running at full speed.
Yeah, the way she rounded third, and then of course just playing first base when she reached her limit for her pitch count. That's Jordy.
Yep, and cool for the softball team to get some action. Lots of those new transfers, new players were in action again. They'll be scrimmaging the rest of this month, and then the Nebraska volleyball team, really a thrilling match. Knew that they were going to be tested by Purdue, but a 5-setter, 3-2. Nebraska barely got the job done.
And it looked like they weren't going to get it done. It's just one of those things. Sometimes the box score does not tell the full story, and it certainly didn't in that one.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll have a full recap for you here next week when we sit back with Brent Wagner for that volleyball podcast, as always. But lots of football action to talk about. As I said, Nebraska, they were on bye last week, and I know you were probably doing the same. I was relishing the opportunity to watch all the college football action, not have a game to cover. There were some interesting games last week.
Yes, there were.
And we're talking about, of course, the Oregon-Ohio State game. Crazy end of that one. And I bring that up because let's talk a little Big Ten here, speaking broadly. Those were probably the 2 best teams in the Big Ten. Is Oregon best team in the conference right now?
I guess.
Yeah. They won.
Now, if Oregon and Ohio State play each other 10 times, I think it's 5-5. I really do. They're really evenly matched.
Yeah. And how about the 12 men on the field, Dan Lanning?
Hey, man.
Genius.
Hey, man. If you find a loophole, use it. Bill Belichick had a guy just to find loopholes on his staff when he was coaching. You got to find them, and if you can exploit them, do it.
Yeah. I kind of like it,
dude,
when you play the rules like that. Yeah,
it's crafty. Now, it probably will never be able to happen again.
Oh yeah, they'll fix that right away.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when sometimes you change a rule interpretation, and there's a unintended consequence of that. And Ohio State is very pissed about it.
Yeah, but big win for Oregon in that one. They look great. I do think that they are the best team in the Big Ten, but man, Ohio State, like you said, offense, defense. I went in, I'm like, this team's the total package. I didn't feel after watching the game any less that. So, really impressive for both of those, but
I think they will play again. Yeah.
2 playoff teams right there. 2 conference championship teams, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see the way that, this crazy 18 team, Penn State will be up there. We'll see the way that this Big Ten shakes out, but flip side of the conference, worst team in the Big Ten right now.
I want to say Purdue, but then again, they played well last week.
They look good.
So it just goes to show that anything can happen on any given day. I mean, who would have thought that Vanderbilt would have beaten Alabama 2 weeks ago, and yet it happened. So you can't take any game off because you never know what could happen.
Yeah, so competitive. I mean, Purdue and UCLA are the two down there.
Oh, for
1-5,
sure.
0-3 in the conference. But I mean, I thought Purdue was down and out. Hudson Card's not playing. I'm like, oh, Illinois is going to run all over this team. Suddenly they got this dual threat freshman quarterback. You never know what's going to happen to them the rest of the season. I mean, UCLA, though, second worst offense in the country. Second worst.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah. So that's a team Nebraska will play later this year, by the way. And also college football general discussion. You got a Heisman pick at the moment?
I do.
You going to share it with us?
No, Boise State's running back, Ashton Jeanty. I don't think that's how you say his name, but incredible. He has more rushing yards than like most teams have rushing yards. He has more rushing touchdowns than most teams do. It's absolutely, it's so fun to watch. And he's like not even old enough to drink yet, which is crazy. But no, he's been incredibly fun to watch. I stayed up super late to watch the Boise State Hawaii game, and it was worth it.
Yeah. I watched the highlights. I was like, oh, sorry. Well, I mean, when that game kick off? 10, 11?
10 Central.
Yeah. For the sickos there.
Boise State's a ranked team. I try to watch as many ranked teams as I can.
Yep.
It's a blessing and a curse of being an AP Top 25 voter.
Yep. Doing the work for the people over there.
Yeah,
you're like, yeah, we'll say that's how it goes.
Yeah.
But
and that's not to discount Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I mean, he's been phenomenal too.
I mean, what he is doing is absurd. He remains in the conversation, even though he did miss parts of the last game due to injury. So I'll be closely following what he looks like the rest of the season. It sounds like he's going to play this week, but yeah, no, he deserves to be in the conversation too. Absolutely, without a question.
Yeah, but the job Ashton Jeanty's done has been so impressive. I agree with you. Probably that front runner there at the moment. But enough of the general college football landscape. We got a Nebraska football matchup to preview. Set to play on Fox's Big Noon Saturday, so they head out here to Indiana. They'll do so 2 weeks in a row. As announced that game at Ohio State, also on Big Noon Saturday. That's a game, that's going to be tough. Ohio State, they'll be coming off a bye in that one, but notable there from a scheduling standpoint. And then an update from during the week, Nebraska awarding 2 new black shirts to very deserving recipients, Sayer Wright and Brian Buschini, both wearing those black shirts now.
I had a feeling that Brian was going to get one.
Yeah.
I knew it. I mean, what he had done in the past 2 games for Nebraska was incredible. I still think the highlight of the Purdue game was his tackle, like the boom tackle.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah. Talk about big plays, toughness, all those different, intangibles that you would say represent a black shirt. And then, I mean, Sierra Wright, obviously, he's been a starter these last few weeks, playing at a high level. So notable
that
those 2 guys. Yeah.
That pick he had, I still can't quite wrap my mind around that one.
Yeah. Little bit of luck, maybe a little bit of coordination. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So good job for both of those guys. And that was something notable from the bye week. But the way that Nebraska approached it too, every coach is going to have their own philosophy, the way that they schedule things, and, gave some time for the guys to rest. But that said, I mean, they did practice. They practiced several days last week, full pads. Ty Robinson, he was kind of joking around. He was like, oh, yeah, we thought that us vets, we're going to have some, days off. So, you get a couple days of full pads practice. But I think that was from Matt Rule. He wanted to keep, I think, some of that momentum going, right, from those last 2 games.
Yeah, and, they don't want to be rusty by this week, right? You can lose quite a bit of fitness if you're not continuing working out. So
yeah,
got to keep at it even if you are off.
Mm-hmm. So they had the weekend off, came back on Monday. Matt Rule said good energy, had a good practice in that one. Marcus Otterfield said they practiced hard on Tuesday, called it Bloody Tuesday.
That's usually their hardest day of the week.
Yeah, that's a tough one for the guys to get through, getting back, to full speed. And of course, a lot of interest about Tommy Hill. He's been out the last couple weeks. The injury update from Matt Rule saying, quite interestingly, that Tommy, he was ready to go against Rutgers, practiced, ready to go, and then foot flared up before the game. I don't know, tore, fracture, whatever.
Tore. No.
Whatever part of the body.
No, don't. So it's a plantar fascia. And it is basically the ligament on the bottom of your foot. And as a corner, it's really hard to, make quick motions, stop and go, what you need to do in that position with a partially torn plantar fascia. So with the plantar fascia, it's actually better for it if you tear it completely and not partially tear it. And it sounds like Tommy partially had it torn until the Rutgers game where it fully tore. Now, obviously, that is incredibly painful. So obviously he could not play when he was in that level of pain right before the game. It sounded like, based on Matt Rule, that happened like during the tunnel walk. So yeah, he's probably not going to go when that happens. So, but moving forward, you wonder if he's going to be able to go this week. He's still day to day on that, minute by minute with that. But yeah, hopefully trending in a more positive direction. But yeah, you think, oh, he tore something. Oh, it's bad news bears. And in the moment, yes, absolutely. But moving forward, it's actually better with that specific injury for some reason.
Yeah, for the long term, rather than just having that nagging at him for several weeks. Looking to recover. Of course, he was able to sit during that bye week, so maybe good to go. Maybe able to play this week. Kicker Tristan Alvano, another guy. They shut him down for a couple weeks. Rule said he's doing some light work, started kicking, but we'll see. That's very touch and go. So not entirely sure about when Alvano will be back. Another point of emphasis, something I was looking at this week, that running back rotation. We've talked about it several times, but it's just interesting here to hear from Matt Rule this week talking about, hey, we need more explosive plays. I asked Marcus Satterfield about it, said, he's content with that three-man rotation because they're running at a high level, but it's just not maybe been as, cohesive week to week as maybe they'd like it so far.
Yeah, that's one thing that I personally would like to see more of, is just more out of the run game. I think that they can do a lot more there, and they know that too.
Yep, agreed. But as we talk about this matchup with Indiana, obviously it's a big one. This is an Indiana team that comes into this one with a lot of hype, a lot of national attention. As I said, it's on Fox's Big Noon. And the way that Nebraska is approaching this one, Matt Rule very focused on the talent of the team in front of him. You come into the year, and I think there's a lot of folks, obviously, there was no guarantee that Indiana was going to be any good. There was a big risk. You never know. New transfers, new coaching staff. You get a couple games, you're kind of like, well, it's Indiana, but you look at the football, and this is a heck of a football team. Matt Rule called them a top 10 football team, said everybody has to forget the logos, the names, said that Nebraska is going to enjoy being the underdog. Indiana about favored by 6 to 7 points when you look at things today, I believe. Yeah,
that's crazy. But, you have to factor in that it's a sold out crowd there. That doesn't happen very often. And that, factors into the line as well. So should be interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, the other big thing too, and this is a streak that's hung over this program for years, for every game. It's defined them. No, not a 6-win season, not a bowl game since the 2016 campaign. They can get that 6th win this week,
This year, I hope they get one
hopefully,
this year.
Yeah, everybody can get a 6th win.
But yeah, it's it's out there. They talked about it a little bit last year when they were in this position, and then it never came to fruition. So I don't expect them to talk about it until it actually happens.
Yeah.
It's also an opportunity to beat a ranked team, which they haven't done in a very long time either.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where for every team nationally, right, that's a milestone, 6 wins, but it means a little bit more a little later in the year when you're talking about a 5-1 team. You're not going to say, oh yeah, 6 wins, that's a great year. Like, no, they have big goals, so they're not focusing on that yet, but it is obviously a very big plot line, a very big milestone that Nebraska could reach with a win in this one. But as we get into our Husker Hot Topic, we'll preview the game here in full here in a minute, but expect a lot of passing. We got 2 really good quarterbacks going up against each other. Curtis Rourke for Indiana, Dylan Raiola, of course, for Nebraska. And these are two guys on opposite ends of their careers. Rourke, he's the experienced senior. Raiola, he's of course the true freshman. And the Husker Hot topic for today: Rourke or Raiola? Who's the better quarterback right now?
Right now, I think it's Rourke, but I think Raiola's ceiling is higher. I think there's something to be said for years of experience. He's been through a lot. He's seen a lot. And I think that he's in a system that really showcases what he can do really well. I think the same is true for Raiola. He's not quite there yet. He's still showing some of the freshman mistakes that showed up against Rutgers. I think his ceiling is incredibly high, but I think as it stands right now, Rourke is more polished and more veteran, and that's where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows what Dylan can become. You see that talent in a freshman, and you just project outward. You just think, man, give him a couple more years to improve and get better. And Rourke has been through that process. It was interesting. Tony White talked about facing him back in the day when Rourke was at Ohio. Said, he was just kind of like an option quarterback. Not really, that full command of the offense yet. And gets those couple seasons at Ohio really, really developed. And I think I do agree with you right now. Rourke he's playing so well. I mean, he's been kind of one of those outside guys. You talk about a Heisman, candidate, and ultimately you look at how efficient he's been too. Like I got some of the numbers, and we'll dive into them here in a little bit. But I mean, he's not been throwing interceptions. He's not been throwing incompletions. I mean, that offense they're running the ball well too. It's not just an all pass heavy offense. And so ultimately, I just think, you get a senior versus a freshman. You're talking about like, hey, who's going to go out and like win one game for you? Dylan absolutely has the capability to do it. Whether he has done it. Whether he was in a Nebraska uniform or an Indiana uniform, if we're just playing the hypothetical game here. But I just think you got the guy in Rourke. He's got all the experience, those several years, playing so well right now. It's just hard to doubt that guy at this moment.
Yep, I agree.
Yep. So scouting Indiana, as I mentioned, I mean, they're ranked number 16 in the country, 6-0 on the year. Played a pretty weak non-conference schedule. I don't feel bad saying that. And then the Big Ten wins that they've gotten, probably teams lower in the conference: UCLA, Maryland, and Northwestern. And it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to say that Indiana's been overrated, because they're not. But you look at the final scores, and they're a little bit different than maybe the way that the game played out. Like that Maryland game, that was close in the fourth quarter. Northwestern, that was a 3-point game late before Indiana did very well in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, the Hoosiers, they've been very, very good. You look at the final score, you think they've been dominant, but they've still had to feel their way through a couple of these Big Ten games, which, as you said, are never easy.
Yeah, a win's a win, and they've got 6 of them. They were the first team in the country to become bowl eligible. Never in a million years would I have picked that.
Yeah.
Ever. But here we are.
Yeah. And by the way, they haven't trailed a single minute all season. So that tells you something. Regardless of the opponent you play, you do that, you're doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really a case where offense, defense, it's all working in conjunction with this Indiana team right now. Here are some of the numbers for you on Rourke. As I was saying, 1,752 yards he's thrown for, 14 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions, completing 74% of his passes. In this Indiana offense, number 4 in the nation in total yardage, 2nd in scoring. They got the number 10 passing offense, and this is the number I think that is crazy to me. I've looked at a lot of these statistics this week, but they're averaging 11 yards per attempt, not per completion, per attempt.
Yep.
I mean, that's a team that is completing passes at an incredibly high rate and for lots of yards when they do it. So, I mean, that is just standout. And then, they're throwing the ball around while they're running it too. They're running for about 200 yards a game. Also very impressive. And those 2 running backs to watch there: Justice Ellison, he's a Wake Forest transfer, longtime teammate of Jamal Banks there for several seasons. And then Tyson Lawson, one of many guys on this team that came over from James Madison. And Ellison, I mean, he's been a home run guy so far. Lawson, maybe a little bit more of the, every down back, but they like using both those guys. And it's really interesting. And some of the Nebraska players talked about this a little bit when we were breaking it down with them. But Indiana, I mean, every play they're either running it, faking the run. I mean, they're always keeping those defenses thinking, you got to think run first and then go to the pass after. And a lot of the times they fake that run and Rourke gets that ball out quick.
Yeah, it's going to be a really big test for Nebraska's defense. I think Nebraska's defense is one of the best in the country, and it's definitely one of the best that Indiana has faced. But it's still going to be a really tough test for them.
Yeah, and they have quite a few good pass catchers as well. I believe it's 4 or 5 guys that have caught about 20 balls this season. Elijah Surratt, he's the one to watch. 7 catches for 120 plus yards in each of those last 2 games, those Big Ten wins. He's been that big target for them. And that's just their offense. That's great, by the way. Their defense is great, too. Number 6 in total defense this year. Number 11 in scoring defense. Really good against the run. Less than 100 rushing yards per game opponents are averaging. And a couple standout defenders to watch. Mikhail Kamara, James Madison transfer. He's their impact pass rusher. 5 sacks on the year. And then Aiden Fisher, he's their do-it-all linebacker there. Another guy from James Madison. Yep, there are quite a few of them on this roster.
As there should be.
Yep.
James Madison was elite last year. They proved that they could play with anybody, and the guys who made the switch still showing they can play with anybody. And James Madison is also still pretty good this season anyway.
Yeah, that's a powerhouse program, no doubt about it. But Kurt Stignetti, he's done a fantastic job with this Indiana team. And as I mentioned, they're the favorites in this one. This is one of the biggest home games that they've had in quite a long time. But our predictions for this one, I'm going to Nebraska win. I think the Huskers have what it takes to get it done. I'm going 28-24 on the backs of this Nebraska defense. I think that they do enough. They shut down enough of those Indiana drives. I think Dylan Raiola should be able to throw for a couple touchdowns. That run game, I think that's going to dictate how things play out for this Nebraska offense. But I think the Black Shirts are going to ultimately decide this game.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as you think it is. I went with Nebraska 21, Indiana 17, because I think both defenses are really, really good. And it's going to come down to explosive plays, and whoever makes the most is going to win this one offensively.
Yeah, and to me, this is a type of game where I think you're pretty spot on with the scoring there. Like, Nebraska does not want this to be in the high 20s. They don't want it. If it's in the 30s, they've got a big problem. If it's that type of game that you mentioned, 2017, maybe it takes a little while for the offense to get going. I mean, that favors Nebraska.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. And our final word today, the couple last things that we're watching for in this big matchup against Indiana. For me, it's again on the defensive side of the ball for Nebraska. Big thing to watch, that pass rush. They've been so good these first few weeks. But like I said, Indiana, they get the ball out quick. They try to keep the defense guessing. So can they crash that pocket? Can they limit Rourke's time to throw? And then when he does have that time, how does the secondary hold up? They've had good moments, bad moments. They've gotten beaten a little bit. There'll be some guys in one-on-one coverage, and Indiana's going to go after that.
Yeah, I also agree with you. Defensively, my thoughts are, can the Black Shirts limit Indiana's thriving offense? How many times do Nebraska's pass rushers get home? I think that's going to be a really big key. And then offensively, can Nebraska elevate its run game?
Yeah, big questions for this Nebraska team. And it's a big point in their season, too. Of course, as I said, that Ohio State matchup looming. They'll have another one after that. And then that second bye week. So, this 3-week stretch coming up. Big one to kick it off, big spotlight on national TV. We'll be there. We'll be in Bloomington. So we'll have all the coverage for you, as always, at journalstar.com. But that'll do it for today's podcast, today's episode of the Life in the Red podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's Life in the Red podcast. Our theme music is composed by Sasha Indy. The stories continue on journalstar.com.